Helen will lead us in the pledge. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we do the adoption, let me share, we have a board member, Lisa Weatherby, is on the phone, a little bit under the weather. Unfortunately, Mr. Townsend is also a little bit under the weather, but we have a quorum, so we will continue. If everyone will look, I need a motion for the adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved in second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The agenda is adopted. Thank you. Safety briefing. We have B. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Bea Four, and I'm the Director of Corporate Applications here at JEA, and I have the pleasure of doing the safety briefing this morning. In the event of an emergency, we will leave through the stairwell, which is to the left as you face the elevators. Be careful of the hazards in the rooms, which are mainly the people in the chairs. Hold the handrails as you go down the stairwell. Our meeting location is Main and Ashley in the parking lot for the church. In the event of an emergency, Melissa Charleroy will call 911, and Mike Brost will call security. My boss, Wanyoni Kendrick, will do CPR if we need someone to do so. There is a fire extinguisher to the left of the elevator as you leave the room, but we would only use that to clear the exits. Turn off your cell phones, put them on silent. The restrooms are to the right as you exit this building. As I said, my name is Bea Four, and I'm the Director of Corporate Applications. I've been at JEA for 15 years. My entire career has been in the IT business. Prior to coming to JEA, I worked for VMI, Virginia Military Institute in Virginia, as well as I worked for the Duval County Property Appraiser's Office. When I came to JEA, I worked in the server group as a civil service employee, was promoted to manager in that group, and I have managed the network area, the server team, and PC support. In 2002, I came upstairs to work with Wanyoni, and I've held several director's positions. One was distributed systems, which was your graphics, your DBAs, your middle tier. And currently now, it's all of the applications here at JEA. On a personal side, I've lived in Jacksonville for 23 years, and I have 3 children, 3 grandchildren. We've been empty nesters for about 8 years. My husband and I are both mentees in Take Stocks for Children, have been for about 6 years. My husband's mentee just graduated from high school this year and has gone on to UNF, and I have a new mentee this year. About 3 years ago, I joined Rotary, and one of the things that I volunteered for was a Rotary Youth Exchange Program, where youth all over the world come to live in different countries for about 11 months, 11 years, great. And they're from the ages of 15 to 18. And I have hosted 3 students. The first student's name is Rex, and he was from Taiwan. I can't even pronounce his last name. And our second student was Anna. She is from Switzerland. And currently we have a young lady, Yuka Yoshizawa, living with us from Japan. They've all gone to DA, and she's currently a DA right now. She dances ballet, and if you've ever been in Rotary, they're big about collecting pins. And so I have a pin from each country. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your public service. Presentations. Bruce Dudak going to give us Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance update. And we have good news.
Good news. I'll give you a little bit of background about this award. Back in 2009, during the economic downturn, our group decided to pursue some grants because at that time our budget was significantly reduced due to the downturn. So we went after a EECBG competitive grant, Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant competitive grant, in collaboration with 13 other cities in the Southeast through the Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance. We were successful in getting the grant, and the Southeast Energy Alliance was an emerging alliance in the Southeast. There were others in the country, but was the first evolving in the Southeast. Well, as a result of the grant, one of the things that we were going to pursue was to get people to begin to take advantage of professional energy audits and in-depth audits where they do diagnosis and analysis of the home, taking a building science approach. And so we promoted that. We also promoted energy efficiency lending, which was new to our area. We collaborated with several lending institutions. We opened it up to all banks and credit unions in the region. We had 3 credit unions who chose to participate. And as it turned out, over the period of time that we ran the grant, which was a little over 2 years, we were very successful in getting people to have these diagnostic energy audits as well as take advantage of EE lending. And I'd like to introduce my team at this time, David Reed and Brian Pippin. David was instrumental in operating the grant over the period of time, and Brian in terms of doing outreach for us and to customer outreach. David usually is behind the scenes, not getting any recognition, but he is where the rubber meets the road, whether it's doing the detailed procurement or doing the detail work in the attic or working with stakeholders. He understands the details and the big picture. Brian is great in terms of working with our customers and appearing on the media. They just make a great team. So as a result of the work, our program and the Southeast program is now finishing as one of the top quartile programs in the country, and Jacksonville, the JEA program, is within the top third of that group. So we're really in an exclusive group. The JEA people couldn't be here today to present, so they did present this. They do have a video that they're going to show that's going to kick off the award. So are you operating, Jerry? Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Paul McElroy. Hello, JEA Board, and hello, Jacksonville. It is my pleasure to bring you congratulations from the Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance for the work you've done to make measurable and specific energy progress in advancing energy efficiency. Thank you for paving the way to sustained economic growth in Jacksonville through your Shop Smart program. Today, I have the honor of presenting you with the JEA's Energy Pro 3 Award for this work. But first, let me tell you what Energy Pro 3 means. There are 3 pros in Energy Pro 3, and they refer to energy productivity, progress, and prosperity. Energy productivity is the promise that energy efficiency holds for our region. Progress represents the results you have achieved to date. And prosperity stands for the goal we're all working towards, which is sustained economic prosperity in the Southeast. Jacksonville has accomplished great results through the Shop Smart program. 460 energy audits, 210 retrofits, over 180 loans made, more than $3.3 million in incremental revenue to contractors, and utility cost savings of $342,000 to your customers. Thank you for this tremendous effort. And to recognize your hard work, it is my pleasure to present the JEA Board and your Managing Director and CEO, Paul McElroy, with the JEA Energy Pro 3 Award for educating your customers on the importance of professional energy audits and the significant economic value of home performance lending. Thank you.
My might just add that this was a great collaboration. The city of Jacksonville was the eligible grantee, and we were a sub-grantee to the city, so we collaborated with them. But also we collaborated with local contractors, we collaborated with local credit unions, and primarily all to benefit our customers. So the great thing about the program is that it was a true win for contractors, for local credit unions, and our customers, and we're very excited about that. And interestingly enough, the credit union that excelled at this the most was Jackson Metro Credit Union, which is the employees, started out as the Utility Employees Credit Union, and they have gone on to achieve national recognition in energy efficiency lending for the work that they've done. So we're very pleased that we were able to do this program, and we're very pleased to receive this award for JEA. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I want to recognize Bruce. This will be his last board meeting with us. He is retiring at the end of the month after many, 37?
38 years.
38 years
Wow.
of service to JEA, and throughout his career, he has always pushed us to achieve more and better things in energy conservation and efficiency. So if we may just a round of applause. Thanks, Bruce.
Bruce, thank you. Have you ever noticed that when we have these great employees, they never tell us they're going to leave until it's always the last? If you notice this, I mean, it's like the humility that goes along with this. But thank you, Bruce. Big shoes to fill, but you've left an extraordinary legacy and your team behind you. And thank you for everything you've done. But thank you for your service to JEA. Really do appreciate
Mr.
that.
Chairman, may I
Yes.
make a point? I had the opportunity to work, I'm sorry. There we are. Can you hear me now? I've had the opportunity to work really closely with Mr. Dewick over the years on a couple of projects, and I just have to tell you, Bruce is an incredible person to work with. The commitment he has to the JEA and the commitment he has to the environmental issues that we face here in Jacksonville is tremendous. We did an incredible event together that he really was the backbone of for about 350 high school students, to introduce them to sustainability and things they can do in their lives to make a difference. And it was a huge success because of him and his team and the commitment they made. So you're going to be missed terribly here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you,
Well, it's
Bruce.
very much a team effort, not just one cog in the machine.
Big cog. Thank
Big
you.
cog, big cog. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you. Congratulations. Any comments? We have no cards? That's all right. And Councilman Bishop, President Bishop will not be with us. They have a Rules Committee?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's really important, so I guess you won't we'll do that. Let's move to the consent agenda. Let me just, for the record, please let everyone know that items Roman numeral 3A, 1, 2, and 3 will require actions, where items 5 and 9 are provided for information. So at this time, I'm going to ask for a single motion to approve all items in Roman numeral 3, A, 1 through 3, and then we will ask for items Roman numeral 3, A, 4 through 9 for information, but I just want to make the differential for the sake of thing. So entertain a motion for,
So moved.
In second.
all right, moved in second, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. So we will move on to that. Strategic discussions and actions, Roman numeral B1. Melissa, you're up.
Good morning.
Good morning. We're only doing good news today, right?
I'll do my best. 3B1 actually does not have an accompanying PowerPoint presentation. Sorry. This item is an amendment to 2 previously approved resolutions, which delegate authority for staff to execute economic refundings in the electric system. The amendment that we're proposing through these new resolutions is one that would allow us to utilize not only a traditional fixed-rate bond structure for a refunding, but also, if market conditions present an opportunity, to use what we call a synthetic fixed-rate structure. If you flip to the agenda item itself, which is the second page in that package, on the bottom right-hand side of that page, there's a chart that shows how this structure would work, and its little boxes and arrows. Before 2008, this structure was pretty common in the municipal market. What issuers would do is look at net fixed rate funding opportunities and evaluate what presented the best economics. And since 2008, I think there's been an increased emphasis on making sure that the various risks that are present in each of these structures are appropriately valued. So we would not be recommending doing this structure unless there was a very significant economic benefit to doing so. As of the last numbers update that we've received from our bond underwriter for this structure, it's about 140 basis points different between doing a traditional fixed-rate bond structure and doing this, what's called a synthetic fixed-rate structure. This resolution amendment would authorize staff to execute the interest rate swap and authorizes the bonds, but then they're subject to us bringing another package of bond documents back for a separate approval at a later meeting. Are there any questions about this structure?
Questions of the board?
Who's the counterparty?
We would do a limited competitive process with each of our three new swap providers, which are U.S. Bank, RBC, and Wells Fargo. Each of them have the same credit ratings. They're AA3. I'm sorry, I just blanked on their S&P ratings. I think they're AA3, AA minus.
Any other questions?
No question. No question.
Any other questions? I think we will need a motion. Yes.
Is the board member still on?
Yes,
Yes.
we're gonna, yes, I'm gonna have that. What I want to do is I want a motion first, and then before we go on. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second? Before the vote, just for that, Ms. Weatherby needs to declare a conflict. Lisa, do you want for the record?
Yes, I'm recusing I'm recusing myself from this vote because my employer, Wells Fargo Advisors, is a wholly owned subsidiary of Wells Fargo Corporation and Bank.
Great, thank you. Any other discussions? It's been moved in second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So that, and with Ms. Weatherby declaring a conflict. Thank you very much. Number 2, pricing?
Pricing policy.
Pricing policy.
This policy is presented this morning in draft form. It is presented for comment and discussion from the board. And at next month's board meeting, we will incorporate any feedback that we receive at this meeting and make sure that we've got it worked into the policy itself, and it'll be presented for approval at next month's meeting. But I've got a PowerPoint presentation to walk through the key changes in this document that are included in your package. Generally, the pricing policy provides broad guidance to facilitate management, control, and oversight of JEA's pricing structure. The primary goal is to establish revenue requirements with a full cost recovery. And it's that cost recovery is done through fair and equitable pricing to recover expenses and meet key financial metrics. The major elements of the policy include the metrics themselves, which are set forth in the policy as goals, the electric system pricing structure for both base and for fuel, water and sewer system pricing structure, and the 5-year projections. This page provides some history of the policy framework itself. In 2005, it was first presented to the board for approval, and that was really the first time there had been a codified document which governed the setting of rates at JEA as a cost recovery mechanism from customers. Between then and now, there have been several evolutions of this pricing document, originally called the philosophy. And those evolutions have incorporated process improvements, the rate-making process itself, and some updates for emerging pricing concepts. The latest version of this policy document is primarily focused on making sure that we codify some of the specific framework around regulatory cost recovery and refunding to customers of over collections. These are things that staff has been doing, and now we've added them to this policy document. The goal of some of these changes in the document is to allow us to move toward regulatory accounting, which is going to become important to us in 2016 when the new GASB rules go into effect, which require us to take our pension liability on our balance sheet. That pension liability will be treated differently under a regulatory accounting framework than it will under our current accounting framework. The next couple of pages provide a summary of the changes that you'll see in the document. And unfortunately, because of some of the administrative changes in terms of moving sections around in the document, the red line itself is not all that helpful in terms of a review. So we've summarized the major changes or the most substantive changes in this PowerPoint presentation. We have changed the document title from a philosophy to a policy. We've added a provision for board acknowledgement of rate-setting impacts on accounting. You'll see that in the second full paragraph in the policy itself, and that is a board acknowledgement. And what it basically says is that there will be recovery of costs from our customers, and therefore we can account for that accordingly. It incorporates some customer-focused language on bill terminology. So you'll be able to look at your electric bill, look at the pricing philosophy or the pricing policy, and understand how each of the components of the policy will affect your bill, because that description is now included. We include additional team members in discussions around pricing changes, and that primarily reflects some of the organizational changes that have happened over the past fiscal year. We rename the demand side management program to a customer benefit program. And the reason for doing that is to broaden the scope of the customer benefit program. So demand side management is one important component of customer benefit, but customer benefit could also include things like electrification. So electric vehicles might fall under this new customer benefit program. And then we've made some administrative changes, which we've talked about in terms of organizing the document. The next 2 pages provide a table summary of the key changes in the document, one for electric and one for water, which compare the previous version of the document with the current draft that you have in front of you today. And I'll just walk through them briefly. In terms of liquidity, we have modified that target to be consistent with the Moody's framework document that they've put forth for AA rated utilities, which is 150 to 250 days of liquidity. And that can include both cash and credit. The debt to asset metric is established with a target of 60%. And so we'll continue to work toward that target, but note we're still pretty far away from that in the electric system. We're at about 77% right now. The customer benefit program funding mechanism has changed. Originally, the way this was established was we created this 50 cent per 1,000 kilowatt hours of system sales budget and said, go forth and spend this. What we're doing in terms of discipline now is turning around and saying, what are the key goals that we hope to accomplish over the next fiscal year? And let's figure out what an appropriate budget would be for those goals, and then fund this mechanism accordingly. So we don't necessarily have to fund up to as much as we had been funding in the past, as long as we're still accomplishing the goals that we set forth for that program. With a note that there is a minimum funding amount which corresponds to a specific line item on customers' bills, which is the customer conservation charge for bills over 2,750 kilowatt hours per month. And that's about $750,000 a year. The variable rate fuel expenses are modified to add fuel procurement, byproduct-related expenses, some handling expenses, and fuel hedging activities that are all related to fuel activities, which are now specifically included in the fuel fund. The fuel reserve target has been changed. And this is really to recognize the amount of volatility that's historically been in the fuel market. For the past couple of years, there has not been actually a lot of volatility in the fuel market. We've seen a plateau of fuel prices, but to quote the rating agencies, I think it was Fitch that said in a recent conference call, the return to volatility is inevitable. And this recognizes that return to volatility by changing the target from 15% of just what we think the next 12 months of fuel expenses are going to be to 15% of the greater of the next 12 months, or the highest 12 months that we've seen in the past. So what that's going to do practically is change our target from about $70 million, which is the current target, to about $94.5 million. Currently, we are projecting to end the year in the fuel fund with a balance of about $109 million, so it would be above even the new target that we've got there. Which brings us to the next line item. Well, what do we do if we get over that target? So we've changed the document to give us some flexibility to come back to the board. Staff will have a discussion about what the most prudent course of activity is based on what we see on the horizon in terms of fuel prices and volatility, and we'll come back to the board and make a recommendation to either refund the extra money to our customers, to make a change in our fuel rate itself, or to continue collecting because we see some storms on the horizon with respect to fuel prices. And we are working on that internally, and we'll bring a recommendation to the board at a future board meeting. Some broader changes to the document are summarized on the bottom. We did add a paragraph about rate philosophy to work in the electric system toward moving toward a pricing structure which is more similar to the water and sewer system, which better recognizes the fixed costs that are embedded in the electric system, and moves toward a service availability charge instead of just a customer charge, which we have in the system currently. We've also clarified that recurring capital expenditures are funded from revenues. Non-recurring expenditures will continue to be evaluated for the best source of funding. Again, no intention to issue new money debt in the near horizon, but this, by policy, clarifies our capital expenditures policies. And it clarifies that excess collections will be refunded to customers, either through reduced charges to better align them with future expenses, or through actual credits like we did in the fuel fund earlier this year. Any questions on the electric document before I move to the water one?
On your rate philosophy, how long do you think it'll take to get to the base rate structure?
That's a good question. We're in the process of doing some rate design around that, because it's while we think our goal is for it to be revenue neutral or cost neutral to our customers. If you look at it specifically customer by customer at different usage points, it's actually sort of tricky to get to a base charge that's going to make everybody cost neutral. So it's we need to be sort of careful with the design piece of it, and we're working on that now. Hopefully we'll have that done within the next couple of months. And then we do need to allow for a lot of time to communicate this to our customers and to the community, to make sure that people are expecting it as it's coming forward. So right now, our hope is to have something that we can roll out the end of fiscal 2014 or beginning of fiscal 2015. But we're still working through some of that timeline.
Do you need a public service commission approval on this?
We do not need approval. They will do a review of our rate, and they have the ability to raise their hand and say that it's not an equitable structure, but we don't need their approval to proceed with it. And if we do a review of other utilities in the state, we're sort of an outlier in terms of our fixed charge is one of the lowest in the state. In fact, it may be the lowest one that I've seen. So there are a number of utilities that have already pursued this bigger fixed cost component and have already gotten commission approval where those utilities are required to for the IRUs.
Well, I think this is great, because I've encouraged this structure, and I think it's going to be necessary going forward.
Yeah, very much.
Great.
Water and sewer?
On the water and sewer system, there are fewer modifications here. We have changed the debt service coverage metric in the water and sewer system. We've actually reduced it a little bit, and that's to be more consistent with where our peers are at our current credit rating in the water and sewer system, and reflective of the pricing structure in the water and sewer system. Because there's less variability around revenues tied to sales, that would be more consistent with a slightly lower debt service coverage metric there. In terms of liquidity, we've changed the minimum to 100 days, and again, liquidity is both cash and credit. And the debt to asset metric, we've changed to a target of 60% to be consistent across all systems, and we are currently meeting that target. We are currently at 59.4. In terms of capital expenditures, similar change with the electric system, that recurring CapEx is funded from revenues, and excess collections in the environmental and customer benefit accounts will be refunded to customers.
Question, Melissa. Particularly in water and sewer, when on the issue of septic tanks, I'm not sure I'm going to articulate this very well. With the capital expenditures and then excess collections, is there a point where, when we're looking at, quote, excess would we come back and say, as opposed to giving it back, that we would begin to evaluate infrastructure to address some of the problems that we're having with septic tanks, or is there a total of disconnect? Would it have to be approached from two different ways? Do you see where I'm?
Yes, let me answer the first part of that question, and then I may ask for some help on the second part of it. But in terms of how you determine excess collection, it's a term of art in the accounting world.
Okay.
And we have the ability to evaluate our capital expenditure plan and make modifications to that plan based on current and future expectations and the needs of the community. So to the extent we get to a situation where we say we maybe have a little bit of room to do some additional improvements to the system, where those improvements would be appropriate, we can fold those into our plan and modify our capital expenditure plan accordingly. How that fits into the septic tank phase out is maybe a somewhat different discussion. So do you?
Maybe septic tank is, maybe I'm making that too narrow, but I'm sort of thinking about just as we're looking at things that we're attempting to reduce, whether it be some into the nitrogen or whatever. And again, I think you've said it gives us some
mitigation
flexibility that we can come back and address it.
Okay, and nitrogen reduction actually may be a good example. It's because that's one where that would be funded from the environmental fund. We have specific targets that we can fund up to in terms of nitrogen reduction levels. We can better those targets and increase our capital expenditures, and that's somewhat discretionary through conversations with the board. And that would impact the amount of funding that's required in the environmental fund.
Mr. Chairman, I think in terms of when we look at system expansion, whether it's septic or sewer or water, I think a framework along the customer benefit, similar to what we have on the electric side, might come in play, where we can target a board-directed percent of revenue to fund ongoing investments in this activity. And I think we're really in the preliminary stages. As long as we look at this policy now and put the framework in place without sort of the percentages, I think it'll give us the flexibility longer term. And I think that if we do go down that path, we need to look for some type of matching commitment from JEA is going to step forward, that we look at others that will benefit from this, both the consumer, the state, the city, maybe federal funding.
Good luck.
Yes.
The other thing that really jumps out, a number of things. One, I think to move from philosophy to policy. Philosophy is like fog. It's very subjective. I like the idea that we're looking at it from a policy. That's number one. Then it's something people can focus on. The second part was on the proposed modification. Your third bullet, incorporate customer-focused language, which I think is, and build terminology. When you mentioned to Peter that hopefully by the end of 14 or early 15, would that say that we're going to be asking or having customers as a part of determine how we're going to say this so they understand it? As we sit here, well, most of us that sit here probably understand our terminology, but to our customers out there, we're almost talking a foreign language. So I'm wondering, if we're going to go into policy, then I think we need to present it in a way that is understandable and that they can react to it, as opposed to the terminology that we use here.
We totally agree, and Monica's team in particular is very focused on that. I'm not sure which utility to attribute this to, but they did some research to try to look at what other utilities were saying about that change, and found one utility that described it in Bugs Bunny terms, that Bugs Bunny was living next door to Elmer Fudd, and if the line went down that went to Elmer Fudd's house, the line would need to be repaired to both Elmer Fudd's house and Bugs Bunny's house. And that both of them would need to be paying for that infrastructure repair, regardless of whether Elmer Fudd was out hunting for 6 months out of the year. So we're looking for ways to make that information easily accessible to our customers.
And you should probably start early.
Yes.
Kind of allow people to kind of digest it, that this is coming, this change is coming in your bill, and that'll make it, I think, an easier transition.
I think it also sort of just also is I think the extraordinary work that the whole organization is doing at, the JD, a power of customer focus, but it's customer understanding. And that's what I'm hearing here, is that if we can get them to understand what we're doing, and with all due respect to the press if it's here, we don't have to rely on the press, on the headlines, for them to understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and when we're going to do it, and what's behind it. And I think that is a good message that you're doing. So I agree with Peter. Sooner rather than later, and I think you're going to get extraordinary support from the board to proceed with that, because I think that's really important as we go forward.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments?
I love your description of accounting as art.
I do want to go there. Any other questions for Melissa on the pricing from the new policy? Thank you. 3, JEA Economic Impact Analysis, information.
This is an interesting report that we worked with the Northeast Florida Regional Council to have put together, and it was an outgrowth of some discussion we had at some of our earlier strategic planning meetings, where we really wanted to get our arms around what is the value of JEA to our community. Northeast Florida Regional Council is a collection or a joint endeavor for the 7 counties in Northeast Florida. And they've got some pretty powerful economic statistical modeling tools that they can use to evaluate not only businesses that might locate here and their impact on the community, but businesses that are already here and what that might mean for the community if they were to leave. And that's kind of the framework that they applied to our analysis here. So if I could get you to flip to the PowerPoint page that we're going to use for this. What they did is approach this analysis 2 different ways. So they put our assumptions in 2 wholly independent, separate statistical models to come up with some numbers. And interestingly, the numbers came out right on top of one another, which sort of validates their results. Now, I will say before I tell you the results that they said these results are conservative, but frankly, the senior analyst that we work with said that he's never evaluated a company that has this big an impact on our county, and so he would prefer to be conservative in terms of presenting the results. So what they found in their analysis is that JEA contributes to Duval County's gross county product, which is the local equivalent of our GDP, between 1.4 and 1.5% per year. So in terms of output, that means somewhere between $860 and $910 million every year. JEA is responsible locally for the creation of between 4,500 and 4,700 jobs. And that's both JEA direct employees and the indirect jobs that are created as a result of our activities here. And we also contribute to the city almost 25% of the city's operating budget. So this was there's some research that's included in your board package that describes exactly how they got to these numbers in the end, but this gives you a sense for the impact of JEA on our local community.
Mr. President, we were talking earlier about the opportunity that we have to begin to have our community be better informed about what we're doing. This just goes to it. And I think the neat thing is, it's one thing to see this slide, which would look really good in front of Rotary or a SAC meeting or a local PTA meeting, but to have, this is the beginning slide and the end slide. I think it's how we come to this. And I think that's the story that we really need to get out there at every possible opportunity to get that, so people understand, particularly given the questions that are coming up with the task force that's down there. What is the value? What is JEA? What do our employees? What is that contribution? These are the kind of things I think that we need to figure out what you all are doing, plus what Jane is doing. This is an opportunity, I think, that we need to get that out there, because we've got the data to say it's not our data. Right. It's third party expert. Somebody comes in with a briefcase. It's not our data. It's somebody else's data. Good work. 4, bi-monthly operations. Monica. Chief Customer Officer, sounds great.
Thank you, I like it too. Well, good morning, and again, excited to be here and share some good news with you. And Chair Hightower so noted that comment. In fact, Jane and I were communicating via text during the presentation, talking about how that can be done. So it is on the list and will be acted on. So
You can text while you sit, it's just texting while driving you're not allowed to do.
Exactly. Okay, well, for the operational update, as we shared in detail last month, we did get our residential J.D. Power customer satisfaction results and did meet our goal of moving into the third quartile. So that information is here, and we are aggressively working as we continue to get our 2014 numbers into the second or first quartile. One of the things I've shared in some of our past presentations is that we also want to pay attention and have also set goals for the business market and our business customer satisfaction. So I did want to present this month as part of our operational update that we did receive our first wave of results for our business market from J.D. Power, and the results were fantastic. I want to be cautiously optimistic in the fact that this is one of two waves. But you will see that JEA was rated number 3 out of our region. And while we don't have the official, all the detailed data yet on our performance, we calculated that to be number 13 out of 95 nationally as well. And we are often compared to one of our neighboring IOUs and want to share that we outperform them by 10 points as well. So we're very excited about that and moving in the right direction on the business market. Specifically, today what I wanted to share, and I will not be able to talk about everything going on, but we'll try to hit some high points. In alignment with our strategic plan, as you're aware, we're focusing on improvement efforts around being easy to do business with. And here is an example of some of our continuous improvement efforts in that area. First of all, our policies. I believe we have quite an opportunity in reevaluating many of our policies to just bring more balance. They are financially responsible policies. We're trying to bring a little more balance to the customer experience with them. One of those policy changes will be taking effect in the upcoming weeks. I believe it will be in October. We will be refunding about 9,000 deposits to our customers. The industry best practices are to hold customer deposits anywhere from 1 year to 24 months for customers that are have a good payment pattern with us. JEA has been holding on to those for 3 years, so we will be taking that to the 24-month mark, which means 9,000 customers will be getting letters and notification in the upcoming months and then have their accounts credited with the deposits. And those are for our customers who have had a good payment history with us during the time that we've held their deposits. We've also found some opportunities in our start service process. In some cases, we have found them from escalations or comments from customers that they've given us feedback that they thought things were not as easy in that transition as they could be. And in other cases, for customer identity verification, if we can't identify things appropriately at the time of the call, customers have to come into the office and provide a photo ID. There are some tools out there where we can do some additional steps to try to verify over the phone so customers don't need to drive in. So we're looking to implement those efforts. We are putting a big cultural shift and change onto first experience and first contact resolution. With this, we're really talking a lot with our staff and our teams of really digging in and looking at root cause analysis and trying to fix things the first time. I have an example that is very, you might consider it small or silly, but I would like to share it because I think it exemplifies what we're really working towards. We received a customer compliment, not a complaint, a compliment. And it was a customer who had not had very fond experiences with JEA in the past, but said she had heard so much about the partnership and effort and changes we're trying to make in serving our customers that she thought she'd give us another try. So she went on to JEA.com and couldn't log in. So she said, I decided I'd try calling, and she said I was completely wowed, and she was complimenting the customer care consultant who helped her. But in that, what we said was, but she still had a problem. She still had to call. Something didn't work right. So the customer care manager went back, pulled the calls, listened to the calls, found that there was an issue at the logon, tried to replicate it, and found what I'd say is a nugget. What they found is that it's very difficult with the font to distinguish between a capital L and the number 1. They sent that on to our business systems team, who said, no problem, we'll change the password component where all the letters are capitalized so that you can clearly distinguish between letters and numbers. Silly, 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 but how many calls come in because someone can't log in? And so that's the type of effort we're trying to put, whether it's a complaint or a compliment, to weed those opportunities out and create a better experience. We thanked the customer. We let her know that her feedback to us gave us that improvement opportunity as well. You have the welcome packet. That is from the WAVE team, one of our WAVE teams, a great effort from multiple employees coming together, and we're excited about that. We have our mobile website that is getting ready to be launched, which will make it more user-friendly from customers who want to do business with us on the smartphone, and then a host of other efforts on there. We're also focusing on community responsibility and empowering customers to make informed decisions. We have a campaign that we will be deploying soon for our e-bill. Right now, we are falling a little short of the industry target as far as the number of customers on our e-bill program, but we are continuing to see people sign up. We will be doing a tree giveaway program because customers who sign up for e-bill are customers who, one, are looking for convenience, but two, want to contribute back to the environment. Obviously, by doing an electronic bill, we save on the paper. We also, in our energy area, have some regulatory requirements about planting trees and tree mitigation. So we're bringing those two programs together. And when we roll this campaign out, customers who sign up for e-billing will have the opportunity to get a tree. And if they don't want the tree, we will donate that tree, I believe it's to Greenscapes, and it will get planted in the community on behalf of JEA's e-billing customers. So that's an example of some of the types of programs that we're going forward with. And then empowering customers to make informed decisions. Our prepaid metering program is still growing, getting great feedback, continuing to make continuous improvement opportunities off of that feedback. Our Facebook page, I'm happy to share that in really a short month or two of having it, we have over 2,000 likes. That might not sound like a lot, but the percentage of our customers that are now following us on Facebook is equivalent to other investor-owned utilities in the region who have had their Facebook page out there since 2010. So we think we're making some good progress and are continuing to work along those lines. And then just increased customer communication, our work with the media, our work using our social media, and just a variety of approaches, and then our tracker, and then of course our increased volunteering, where our employees have doubled their participation in volunteering into the community. So I know I covered that very fast. If there's specific questions you have on any of the items I didn't cover, I'm happy to take those, and we're pressing on.
Monica, are you going to change the book? It says after we go to 2 years, it says 3 years.
Yes, that is an example of a change we'll need to make. And so we did actually make a smaller run of the print on the books because we knew that there were things that we are continuing to improve. And so as we do that, we will make those updates on those changes. So,
Any other questions? I do. On the I'm assuming on community responsibility, middle school education, is this going into the schools to talk about? I'm this former teacher talking. On this part here, I'm almost wondering if we could develop something with the new superintendent. It says how to read your JEA bill. There's almost, to me, a natural connectivity for math, understanding financial planning for kids to understand this. I mean, I understand conservation, purchase on revenue. I get that, Melissa. Okay, I understand that. However,
Certainly.
the students will be users down the road, and I'm just wondering if there's something.
Bringing math into
some
that?
sort of an incentive or program that we can use in the schools where we can get kids to use this part of a math discipline or
absolutely.
curriculum.
And then go home and help explain it to their
and then
parents.
maybe have some sort of competition with the schools or kids that understand that. Certainly. you know.
We can certainly look at that.
I think the superintendent, I think in partnership with the superintendent may be a huge opportunity, particularly in some of our areas where, and let's be honest, I mean, we have a huge part of our population, our customer base that is, you know, economically challenged. Get those kids involved, they will help at home.
And an
I think there's a
understanding.
huge opportunity for us to partner there. Just a thought.
Excellent, thank you.
Yes. I was going to say, it was discussed this morning, we had a lot of very favorable press of late, you know, and that's very much appreciated coming from boards where sometimes the press isn't always favorable. So I certainly appreciate that. And then also, I remember, I think it was last week, where the TU did an article, you know, the J.D. Power ratings came out, but they wanted to do their own, right? And they took, they strategically placed the negative ones up top, but the positive ones outnumbered the negative.
Yes.
And I thought that was significant because for you to have an impact, for us to have an impact, for you to have an impact on a customer, that they're willing to take the time to write something positive speaks volumes about the effort they're making, so we appreciate it.
Thank you. And we have gone back on the 2 or 3 that have negatives, and we did look into them as to what they were. One of them, we do have the opportunity to contact and see if there's a resolution. The others go back, you know, 2 and 3 years to policies at those times. But on another one, we're still contacting to get feedback for, based on their experience, what type of ideas do they have and how we might be able to balance our policies, just to let them know that,
Yes.
that we've heard them, we've seen them, and we value their input, even though we might not be able to do anything to change their situation. We certainly welcome their experience and feedback for moving forward, so.
It must be, I mean, I've got to believe that when somebody has the negative story and they get a call saying, "This is JEA, I'm here to help you, what can I do?" I mean, they think they must be on TV or something, that somebody's watching, but, you know, that makes a huge, may not change every
Right.
perception, but becomes part. They will say it to someone, and it gets taken, so.
Yes.
Monica, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Extraordinary. Mike? All right. Brian, I'm sorry. I was trying to get,
That's good.
we're only doing positive things here now, Brian.
Hey,
You're on a roll.
I really like your idea about teaching the bill at the school. And I have middle school students start 6th grade, so I look forward about 2 years from now, and they come home and I can explain something to them, what a kilowatt hour is, a kilowatt hour, how it turns a dollar. Because yesterday was something on atmospheres, and I wasn't there. So
The
that's
Bugs
great.
Bunny thing may work.
That's tough. That was tough.
we're not going there.
Do we have the wrong presentation? Back to the op report. Number 4, there you go, Jim. Good. We're good, we're good. We have 5 or 6 slides on the sewer system. We'll start off on safety, because every other month, Mike and I switch off on safety. JEA's recordable incident rate this year, we're year-to-date at 1.74. Our target's 1.20, so we're not going to make the target. We do want to remind us that it is a top quartile, but top quartile is never enough. And then, interesting, in middle school, the last thing I said to the boss this morning in the elevators, I had a close call myself this morning, and it wasn't a work. It wouldn't have been on that chart, but every moment matters. When we have a lot of our incidents where there's near miss that Angie's really helped us report, or actual incidents or around vehicles, whether people get wrecks, whether people trip and fall out of vehicles. I got almost walked into a moving car today. In New York City, that'd been nothing. But it was a day going to work. But here, a close call in a car is a different story. So really, vehicles are an item that we have a lot of issues around, and we're continuing to work on it. I do think Angie we had a meeting last week on the near reporting, near missing, and brings that awareness. We'll bring it every day. I think today's incident will resonate with me for a while and help for my staff. Our other most recordables this year, we have 32 year-to-date. It's across the system, mostly electric, water, and customer service area, because we have most of the employees in the field. But the number one cause of slips, trips, and falls, and then nature injuries are strains, muscles. Some of the wellness programs we do will help mitigate some of those, help prevent some of these incidents. But we do have a couple in industrial accidents during the year. So we look at a whole perspective. We have big initiative next year to get that number back down to try to reach that best of class 1.20, and that's our goal.
Brian, I'm more interested, not in the strains and the small things, but the nature of your work is sometimes pretty dangerous. Have we had any really big incidents where people have been seriously injured?
This year's not the point of over my 20, 30 years being at JEA. Every 5 years we have something very terrible happening. I think our most serious incident this year, we had a gentleman in my area that broke his leg very bad in a construction site. He's been out of work for 2-3 months at this point in time. Expect full recovery, but that was a serious construction accident on pipe slipped. We've had a couple other incidents in the construction field where wrenches might, the energy of a wrench might come back and hit someone and knock out a tooth or something of that sort. So we do, that's the focus I come from. I've worked in industry, worked in oil refineries. I've seen people get hurt very bad. We've had some bad tragedies over the decades, but that is very much of our focus in the field.
Thank you.
Back to the good news, Chairman. On cost, we're at $4.55 per 1,000 gallons on water this year, which is below our budget and our rate agency target. And most importantly, it's below our FY12 baseline, 4.72. With our strategic plan, our objectives to keep our costs at or below FY12 levels for the next several fiscal years. And the sewer are 8.08, so $8.08 per 1,000 gallons. A little bit easier to talk gallons and kgals than kilowatt and kilowatt hours, but think about a sewer, $8 per 1,000 gallons. Water is close to $4.50 per 1,000 gallons. Still a great bargain. Our forecasts are lower.
Brian?
Yes, sir.
What do you attribute the good numbers to?
The lower capital cost is the biggest driver. We are a little bit lower on the on the O&M, about $5 million on the O&M at the bottom there, Peter.
Okay.
But the capital is the driver at $28 million lower. Capital costs, there are several projects that we stopped that weren't good returns. And then we have some natural, if you got a budget of $120 million, sometimes you got to spend 120 or less. So some of the natural savings there. We also have a couple projects that we were able to delay that we will spend in future years.
I'm just concerned that we maintain, obviously, the system in very good repair.
I've heard that probably, I hear it well, Peter, I think 2 or 3 months in a row between chairman and maybe a few other board members and yourself. We have a big focus on our R&R system. The biggest concern we have would be our pipelines and would be our water and force main pipelines to make sure that we're getting a program to understand what is our exposure over the next decade, maybe even 2 decades on that, and we'll have a program over the next year, have a nice R&R plan we haven't done that in good 10 or 15 years at JEA, a published R&R plan on your force mains and large. There's been a lot of work done on it, but in a sense of a published plan, last one was in the late 90s, RS&H did for JEA. We're working on that.
Okay.
We do have a couple other projects too that we know is going to hit us over time in the sense of biosolids and what's my other big one? Paul and I were in his office Friday. What's the other big one we have? We have a little bit of expansion challenges down the south grid in the sense of Blacksford plant, Mandarin plant. We have some expansion challenges. We know it's going to be a big capital cost. And but the big concern, I think, on keeping the system working well is the R&R of the force mains and gravity mains.
Brian,
Yes, sir.
just to follow up there, thanks to the president here. We took over from the city, transferred over to 98.
1997.
Do we have a running total of what we have done? There was a reason why it was given to us, obviously, but what have we done to enhance that system that we inherited or got volunteered to take?
I think from a money side of point, JEA's put over $2 billion, $3 billion into it since 15 years ago. Paul had a presentation in City Council last week that talked about we had over 300 cave-ins a year, and now it's less than 120. We had actually cave-ins were more like 800. Excuse me, Paul. We had over 300 SSOs a year, and now we're down.
SSOs.
Sewers, sanitary sewer overflows, which was sewers end up on the street. At 98 itself it was only 120, but the number was even higher early 90s, and now we're going to have 25 or 30 this year. We had pressure situations in 1998. I remember I first came back in JEA in 97, interviewed with Mr. Duke, who's not here. That was a year we had low pressure across the city. We emergency drill wells in Mandarin, in Deerwood area. We had emergency drill wells to get water. That's the same year we had the fires in Jacksonville in 98. So you look at from where we were to where we are now. On the money situation, I can remember the chart in my prior job. The city was investing $20, $30 million a year in R&R. You know, we're at 100. This is 100 baseline, but most of it's R&R work we're doing right now as we speak. There's a little bit of a efficiency and a little bit of expansion, but mostly R&R. And the city was at $20, $30 million a year for everything. And the city was growing in 97. I mean, not growing quite like it was 202, 203, but it was growing in 97. So I think the investment we're putting into it from current year revenues is extremely major accomplishment JEA has done.
I just think that's, we've had a whole lot of folks who've now moved to Jacksonville since then, and a lot of customers, and I don't think we need to beat our chest about it, but I think that we need to keep that in perspective, because a lot of folks didn't know all we were was JEA. Now we're everything. And I think those kind of improvements structurally, to the point that Peter made about we've got to make sure that infrastructure from where we were to where we are, a subtle, gentle reminder of what we've done, the great work that's been done, one, from a financial perspective to do it, but two, the quality of life of what we've done. And it must be a way that we can subtly, gently remind and put that out there as part of our history of.
I'll have another note on another slide that help remind us of another item too, pipe bursting and stuff.
And I think one very big metric, which is in the current discussion, public discussion, is that in the numbers that Brian mentioned, there was $400 million invested on behalf of JEA in the urban core in terms of the pipe bursting for the sewer collection system. So there is a misconception there that there's been no investment whatsoever in the urban core, and all of the investment has been outside of the core. But it was a very, very large scale investment on behalf of taking over and retrofitting what we currently have, and that's what drove those metrics. So
And the next two slides will remind us. There's two items here. So this first top left is our unplanned water main outages. This month we had over 750 customers impacted by that. One was a apartment complex with over 400 customers that a third-party contractor drilled into one of our pipes. So that's wasn't our fault. It's our pipe. It's our customers. We have to fix it. We'll go back and look at claims. Other times we may have an outage to a building like this. It's only counted once right here. So this is a good representation of our pattern. We know, but maybe not exact severity of how many customers are out. So we could have one building out only being one customer, but might in fact, 500 people in a building. We do know this time of year of the rain, we do have a lot of challenges. We had asbestos cement pipe along San Jose Boulevard. And remind me about what Paul and Mr. Hightower were speaking about. The investment in pipe bursting, we also went out and replaced old galvanized pipe. When we're doing sewer pipe bursting, we replaced the water pipe in the neighborhoods like Murray Hill. A lot of the area of town that was built in the 50s and 60s would have pipe, old galvanized pipe, or asbestos cement. It was the best in class at the time. But that pipe has worn out, so we have struggled when they have repair. You fix it one day, it breaks another day. So we're looking at an R&R plan to put our hands around how much more is left of that type of pipe at this point in time. The next one, water distribution, less than 30 PSI. Back in 1998, this would have been off the chart. Neighborhoods, sections of town were less than 30 PSI for days and weeks at a time. So we have 101 points around the town looking at the pressure, so we have very good performance there. And our customer response time on our outage is great too.
Brian, do you have software that basically tracks every pipe that we have, that shows where it is, what it's made of? I know that software exists.
We have two softwares. Is it working? The data as good as it should be. We have GIS system that tells you where all your pipes are at, and we have a Maximo system that shows you the maintenance on it. We have a big initiative with our enterprise asset management to know each pipe segment and know the date or how old it is, condition it is. It's not where it needs to be. A lot of that, and we still have a couple people that have a pipe in their head, so they go out there and say, wait a minute, that valve exists. My director, Scott Anaheim, says, I know that's not, in the south side where one of our council members talking about, there's an extra pipe there. So he puts a red line on there and goes back in the system and corrects it. So some of the, when we bought utilities, the baseline data didn't come over too well, so we're continuing to update that. And that's a major push we have over the next couple of years. And I've seen it done 20 years ago without these sophisticated software systems, so it can be done. You know, back in the old dot matrix purchase, you know every single pipe you have, so it can be done. On the environmental compliance, the cup, we're at 100 million gallons a day average consumption this year, well under our 126 million gallon a day limit, 21% below. Not a concern this year, we'll always be concerned for the next decades to come. Total nitrogen discharge to river, we're forecast to be 764. We, at 709 right now, Buttman construction, the BNR, is coming near completion. We still have construction of Buttman for another year, but the part to remove the nitrogen will be up by the end of the calendar year. We will be in the 600s next year. We're at that point in time where our efficiency is doing well as we speak, but we're still carrying the previous month, so we're not perfect yet, but we will we'll do well next year. SSO is the bottom right. Paul mentioned the pipe person, $400 million spent in pipe person. Fundamentally changed this number where we're in the 20s or 30s, maybe 60s or 70s, and used to be hundreds of sanitary sewer overflows prior to. So the pipe person helped tremendously there. Two more slides here. Our sales, water sales are down 6.8% compared to FY12. Mostly on irrigation and with all the rainfall, the steady rainfall we had this year. We are forecast to be 6.3% below. That's on water and sewer forecasted. It doesn't show it directly, but it's 4% below. The 1,050 is about 4% of the 25 billion gallons of sewer, so about 4% lower in sewer and about 6% low on water. That helps stabilize the revenues because sewer revenues are greater than the water revenues. So our sales revenue is going to be 1% lower than last year. That was a mitigation of a little bit of the volume rate increase we had. The lower sales brings it down, and then the capacity fees. We have $16 million in capacity fees, so there is development and growth. We forecasted 7 or 8 million, so we have doubled that forecast. So there is some growth. We're trying to get ahead of the curve on our engineering and our construction for that. Again, our O&M expenses are 119. Last year was 120. And then our capital is 104, and we are concerned to make sure that we keep the system up. But we're fine for this year. We'll put some of that money in the bank for future projects, and eventually, if there's an opportunity, we'll use it towards debt if there's an opportunity. And then our metrics are great. Meet all the metrics at 2.4 coverage, days cash. I'm glad that Melissa's changing that 2.25 is one less decimal I need to worry about. We'll be at 2.2, and we'll cover that for the next several years. The last slide are rates. We're in the middle of the pack, or a little bit on the side of the high side of the middle pack. Don't have any great news. Like Mike's going to have some news that the other competitors in the benchmarks in the electric system are having rate increases. We don't see that movement right this minute on the water, but we do expect some of that over the next couple of years. Any follow-up questions?
Any questions for Brian? Question for Brian?
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Welcome, Mike.
Good morning, Mike. Board members.
Good morning.
The report from Electric this month is basically no surprises. Pretty much in line with the last couple of months. The things that are going well continue to go well. The things that are challenges remain challenges. Brian referred to safety. That's something that in my group and across the corporation we need to work on, greater focus moving forward. Unit sales has been the big challenge for us this year on the electric side. For the second year in a row, we'll end up right around 12 million megawatt hours of unit sales, $60 to $70 million shortfall in revenue. That's the challenge. The good news is we've worked to cover it throughout the year. Looking at the electric costs in the top section, the bottom-up cost-driven dollars per megawatt hour, 93.51 is indicative of the fact that even though the denominator unit sales has been down, applying upward pressure on that, we've been able to keep the numerator, the cost side, down as well. 93.51 is favorable to budget and to the rating agency targets. It's in line with last year's actual, 93.51 versus 93.37, and about $10 better than the near $104 per thousand from 11. A lot of that is attributable to the fuel, and that's probably the brightest spot from a financials perspective. In the second section on the financials, if you look at, shows you your revenues, expenses, and net. So looking at the revenues, we are short from budget 78 million. Now, 38 of that is rather 36 of that is the refunding. So the other portion is due to unit sales being off against budget. Fortunately, the expenses are down to a greater degree, over 100, which gives you a favorable shift on the net from a budgeted $7 million deficit to a $17 million or $24 million swing positive. O&M and capital down collectively $64 million compared to budget, and those are, as Brian indicated, more on the capital for the water side. Those are the areas we've been able to manage costs throughout the year to keep the things balanced and to keep our dollar per megawatt hour solid at 93.51. Moving off the dollars to some of the other key metrics, electric service reliability, the outage frequency and duration are continuing to trend down over time, favorable to targets. Transmission line faults, we've had a ramp up in the last 5 or 6 months. August was the first month we've had an improvement. We did some looking around a little bit. Lightning strikes, thunderstorms, in the months of June and July in Duval County, we saw a 60% increase in 2013 in those 2 months compared to the July and June in 12. And that caused our run up. In fact, we had 3 times as many transmission line faults in those 2 months in 13 as compared to 12. August, it's been quite a bit quieter. We had half as many transmission line faults this August as compared to in 2012. So that explains the transmission line fault frequency chart. Our generating,
Mike?
yes, sir.
Let me ask you the same question I asked Brian. On the capital and the repairs, are we keeping the system in good repair?
Yes.
Are we improving it where it needs to be improved?
Absolutely. We have very mature risk management and asset management processes and programs. We stay up on top of the condition assessment in really real time of the equipment and are spending money where we need to spend money.
Okay.
No more, but certainly not getting behind.
Okay.
$100 million a year capital is, and this is higher than $100 million. If you just looked at a baseline, recurring, no growth, keeping up with the assets, that's about what we need to spend, and we're doing a little better than that, and then a lot of that is to improve reliability. So it's not just the baseline, but to do a little better.
Yeah. I mean, I can understand that when you have a weak year, as we have,
Yeah.
adjusting the capital, but you don't want to get to the point where you're doing that on a regular basis and you're stealing from the future.
We agree.
And that's my only concern.
Go way back in the histories of JEA, I think there were some times where we probably, Mr. Hightower probably remembers even back into the 70s and earlier, where we, in our power plants in particular, we got way behind on
Yeah,
on
if we have a
maintenance.
problem,
Yeah.
I'd rather deal with it at the front-end revenue.
Absolutely, yeah. Need to know it. No hidden problems for future generations. As evidence of that, our generating fleet is having top quartile performance again this year, 1.8 outage frequency. We did, we addressed this 2 months ago. We did have a ramp up in forced outages in the fall and the spring associated with the return to service of a couple of units that had had some major outages. But for the past couple of months, the units have been performing quite well. This is a year-to-date number. And on environmental permit compliance and reportable events, we had 3 earlier in the year, have been flat at 3 for the past 5 months. So doing well in the generating fleet. This is our chart on the fuel fund. The bars at the bottom show budget to actual. You can see in August we were down 16 million off of budget. A lot of that is unit sales being off from budget, but we're looking at another 14 or so in September. Melissa referred to the ending balance currently zeroing in at about 109 million due to a $17 million favorable surplus this year. The 2 columns on the right pertain to fiscal year 14 coming up. When we did the budget about 5 months ago, we were estimating an annual surplus of 12 million revenues in excess of expenses. We were also expecting to start the year at 91.7 million. Currently, that's up, so over to the right. 109 million is our current starting balance, and when we add in what now appears to be a $49 million surplus for fiscal year 14, that's going to put us up around 160 million at the end of next year. Now that's our today, looking out 13 months crystal ball, a lot of opportunity for volatility, but that's where we're looking right now in terms of our projection. So we've had about a $60 million favorable shift over the past 5 months in terms of what fiscal year, into fiscal year 12 looks like. So a good story there. And Melissa addressed some of what we will do with that in the coming months through the price setting policy. Looking at the electric system financials, same story as we've seen over the past couple of months. Flat sales year over year, flat expenses, operating expenses year over year. Total revenues down and net revenues down. Net revenues down 33 million. Again, that from a year-to-year perspective, we didn't have a $36 million fuel refunding in the spring like we had this year. So that's kind of where that delta is coming from. Looking at 125 million in R&R and OCO, supporting only 121 million in the capital. So pretty good shape there. The table on the left, midway down, shows the 7 bullet areas where we will support the $68 million revenue shortfall. And a lot of that is just capital and O&M and some other things we can do. This year, not sure about future years. We have another year like this or two. It's going to be harder and harder to balance things up. Our coverage will be fine this year at 2.5. That's in line with targets. Liquidity is good. Paying off about 228 million in debt, which will put us down 4% on the debt-to-asset ratio, down around 77%. Much like
228 for electric, the electric side? Pay down in debt?
228, yes, sir. Will put us at 3.7B.
Yep.
Brian,
Continuing to
you
work,
know what
continuing to work
yours
that
is?
down.
I think it's 47, and that would put us at 1.90 billion. Right now, we're like 1.947.
Okay. Okay.
Just real quick, where were we a year ago in those two in debt?
We were 1.95 billion 12 months ago. We paid off $47 million October 1st last year.
We were just below 4 billion on the electric.
Great progress.
So,
Yeah, again,
Good, steady
I think I
progress
asked
on-
Paul for it, but at some point, I'd like to see a chart on these, just to visually see how we're making progress.
the debt outstanding, yeah.
Yeah.
We have that.
$600-700 million lower than we were 2 years ago, right?
Oh, I know, that's
yeah.
it's very good progress.
Yeah, and I think we need to see that. That's a coach to the positive.
I think
Electric
our
bill
rating
comparison?
agencies would like it too.
Yeah, I do
I'm
too.
sorry. Electric bill
We need that
comparison.
as part of our presentation. Like,
We are remain in the middle of the stack.
go back.
As Brian alluded, there's some rate action coming for some of our peers in the state. I might add that this chart does not give us any credit for the 36 million one-time fuel reduction. Could annualize that, divide it up amongst the 12 months. We would drop down a couple if we just made that change. You also get a different interesting, Melissa talked about rates and the rate design and how much is fixed versus variable. We do have a very, very low fixed amount, and it's all variable. So what happens is you compare us to our peers. For example, at 1,000 kilowatt hours versus 1,250, we actually get more competitive. So part of the rate redesign is to get us a little more consistent with our peers, and we'll make the comparison a lot better. And again, we do have some rate action plan that's been in the news lately in the last couple of weeks, actually. TECO is looking at a 5.5% increase in their base, effective in November. Clay Electric, 3.5%. FPL, largely fuel-driven. They're what's not nuclear is natural gas units, so they've been seeing the increase in natural gas pricing lately, 5% they have announced. Duke Energy, Florida, used to be Progress. Before that, it was FPC, 7%. Mainly fuel, a little bit of base. Georgia Power, 7.5% in base. Gainesville, part of that may be their biomass coming online, 10.6% coming up. Many of these are already above us in the price anyway, so we're not moving down. And the FPL increase is, they're the lowest in the state, all in, and not enough movement there to make any change. But I think Clay Electric will, when that goes into place, since our rates are low and stable moving forward, we'll hop over them.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to continue to be as efficient as possible. This is part of us being able to attract industry to this area. And I know we've got this new incentive program, but in time, we may even need to do more.
Agreed. Very important to the local economy.
Mike, I have a question. When you go back to when it shows what we're doing in revenue, I'm not going to articulate this very well. We've put a lot of emphasis on conservation. Is there a way that when we work with a customer on conservation, or we've helped them replace something or do that, is there a way that we can track some percentage as a result of what we've done with customers on conservation so that we understand that? Is there a way that we have a way that we can show that?
Yes.
Richard, and the only reason I say that is that when we talk about revenues down and stuff like that, that sends out, to me, a negative. The good news is the more successful we are in conservation, it's going to hit the bottom line.
Right.
Okay. But I think there's also a thing of coaching to the positive that long-term conservation needs to be a part of our psyche, needs to be part of our DNA. And there's an issue that we will probably have to look at of how we do that. But I don't think that we should ever not reinforce conservation. I think long-term, when you look at our customer base, and that's something that we should celebrate.
Agree.
And improve. So is there a way that we can kind of show what we're doing?
We have tracked that over the years. Richard Vento, we've had a very successful energy efficiency and conservation program. We track every project that we do. We have a lot of data on that.
We
I think
just
when
had
you
some numbers earlier.
But I mean, that we can show that as a result of that, we can do that.
It was $300,000.
Yeah, I saw that one that was
Yeah.
that, but that's not what it cost.
Right.
Yeah.
I think when you look at the unit sales down, it's the energy efficiency, conservation. It's also the economy is still trying to rebound from 2008, 2009. It is also weather. We have had 2 years of abnormal warm winters and cool summers. But I think to Mike's point on the conservation, I think we need to focus on continuing to reduce the amount of consumption per customer per month. That's different than reducing unit sales. We have to look at growing the number of meters, not so much as opposed to the amount of consumption per meter per month. So I think we can do both, and it's a balancing act.
There's another way of looking at that efficiency, and electric cars. Electric cars increase our usage of electricity, but on an overall basis of being efficient, they are extremely efficient and very environmentally friendly. So I think that's something that we ought to encourage. And there are different ways I think we can encourage that. Like perhaps having an incentive program for installing a hookup in your home for an electric car.
Charging stations.
Maybe you get a little bit of a rebate or something for doing that, for a plug-in hybrid or a plug-in electric. So that's something that's a win-win for us.
Or maybe along those same lines, you're seeing it pop up in Tallahassee, that in the public parking garages, that there are 2 or 3 spaces are being,
Charging stations, yeah.
the charging
Out in the field.
stations.
I know Orlando's done a lot of that.
I've tried to
Try to
get
promote
Paul,
it.
I've tried to get Paul to buy a Tesla, but
He's holding out.
I got a
Yes.
quick question, is really a comment/last question. On the performance objectives, right? So, forced outages and the like. When I go out to Joe Citizen and he's talking about outages, I like to be able to tell him he has 98% availability or 99%.
Yeah.
When he flips the switch, 99.9% of the time he's going to get what he's looking for.
Yeah.
Or she, and they're not going to be able to make the translation between this and that. So what number should we as a board kind of carry and says, 99% of the time, you get what you're looking for when you flip the switch?
Yeah, that's a good question, Mr. Winbush. Something, I probably need to work on that and try to do a little more with that. What we generally say on the upper left chart, it's 1.7.
Yes.
The typical JEA customer sees it's an average, so it's 1.7 outages a year. So that's what 1.7 means in plain English. Now,
Yes.
What does
And
that
the-
translate to? What does that translate to? 1.7?
Outages a year. So you can try to convert that into percentage availability.
No, because here's the thing, that's something they can grab hold of, and a lot of times we need to remind them what they do get.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
when they
Turn it
don't
around.
get anything, oh man, it's the worst thing, et cetera, et cetera. But if you got 99.9% availability, the cost associated with getting that other point, right, tenth of a point up there is cost prohibitive, and nobody's willing to pay for it. But to remind them that 99.9% of the time, you get exactly what you're expecting, and that's to be applauded and not forgotten. And unfortunately, it is a lot of times. You take it for granted.
Take
in other words.
take the negative and turn it around into,
Yeah.
instead of talking
Absolutely.
about how many outages they have a year, what percentage of time the lights are on, they do come on.
Right.
Mike,
Something I can take the outage database and work on, Helen?
on the 1.7 outages,
Mhm.
is that like, what's really the, I guess, the unit that's used for outage? Does that mean I could experience an outage, 1.7 outages on one day, or is it across the days? Do you know what I mean? I mean, is it?
What is the 1.7 relative?
Yeah, I mean, because
Relationship to-
so to Mr. Weinbush's point, how can I explain that in terms of every day I can go and flip on the
Right.
switch and something will come on?
And is that outage, is that 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour?
1 minute.
How much?
Outage is 1 minute or greater.
Okay.
So
Well, I think-
that's what we're trying to get our head around.
I
and
think
so-
Well,
the
and then
math
the-
tells you system-wide, Mike, right, it's 1.7 per year per customer.
Right,
And
per
the
year.
average duration is on the right there. It's sort of 80
67.
minutes.
How much?
80 minutes?
67 is year-to-date.
67.
The goal is 80.
67
So
minutes.
call it an
So
hour.
It's 2 times,
So you lose
round
an
up 1.7,
A
2
year.
times,
Right.
times
Yeah.
60, you're out 2 hours out of 8,880 hours.
Yep.
Then you do your math and come up percent. Yeah.
You got
So we'll
to
come up with the
calculate.
math
Okay,
for
so
that, but
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, that's what I was getting at, right? Because I knew
Right.
it's darn near 100%, but nobody can guarantee all the time. So
Well,
I
and
post-
there's what I call the subtle, gentle reminder. Perfection is never, well.
you don't want to pay for
You'll
it.
never.
Taken for granted.
Well, we couldn't, how many lightning strikes?
Redundancy.
What does a lightning strike do to our system? I mean, that's something that, until I heard it, how do you keep Mother Nature from interrupting the Hightower household when there's a strike that's going to do something? I mean, there's this way that we need to remind them in a gently way is you don't enter nature into it or something like that, okay, that's fine, but, is it possible to have 100%? No.
No.
I mean, a lightning strike is going, what does a lightning strike do? Bam. But then you talk about how long that will be. Again, we immediate gratification, the expectation is perfection. We need to gently remind them what that means.
Right.
So we can certainly take our outage database and work on some metrics that are more, instead of the percent defects, is more how many time, what percentage of the
Customer
time is it
consumable
availability? Yeah,
data.
from that-
How's that?
From that perspective.
That's what we're looking for.
And 100% is not realistic, nor would it be particularly affordable. The flip side is, these are industry standard metrics that allow us to compare ourselves to other peers. So from an internal perspective, it's
Absolutely.
good to benchmark
Yes.
these sorts of metrics. But from an external customer perspective, we can.
But
work
I
on a-
think, to Mike's point,
Mhm.
if you ask the customer and they sign up, it says, if we weren't them enough, and you had a choice, and he says, okay, you sign up with us, we'll give you 99.98% availability, would you like to sign up with us? They say, heck yeah. Right?
Yep.
So we're delivering.
Very good.
Back on the water, just about water and sewer. 2 weeks ago, I was driving through Atlanta. I should say I was parked in 95 going through Atlanta. And so, you know, perfect timing. Never hit Atlanta at 5 o'clock. I'd sit there till 6:30. So in listening to the news, there was a huge part of Phipps Plaza, that whole area, what's it called? There. Buckhead.
Buckhead.
They had a water main, 2 water mains broke, and as they were trying to fix the water main, the bigger pipe that did that broke, and they were going to be, that whole area was going to be out, like they were saying, hopefully no more than a week. No more than a week, because they would have to fix the bigger piece before they could fix the smaller piece. And they would say is that they were making stuff that they would before they could get the material, but the bigger, and they said, but hopefully within a week, 10 days, they would get it fixed. So that huge area, no water pressure. And they were telling them how you had to boil water. I'm going, maybe this isn't all bad. You know, Jacksonville is, you know, when you're thinking that in that part of Atlanta, you know, it's just unbelievable. And that's not exactly an area that needs incentives to turn on the water.
Right.
It's incredible. So everything's relative to this point. We gently need to remind folks that this isn't a bad place to live. And we're doing well. Thanks. Thanks to all of y'all.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
You have a question? All right. Okay, we are at overhead underground.
Speaking of reliability, I have, the add-on, follow-on presentation for this month.
This is Peter's big thing, all underground, all underground.
I'm all for it. All for it.
It's not going away either.
Information item for the board this month on the popular topic of underground power lines. Comes up from time to time. Just wanted to go through a little bit of the introduction and the background, some utility benchmarking, look at the big picture of underground lines in terms of advantages and disadvantages, a little bit on costs and rate impacts, conversion programs, and summary. For the sake of scoping this, distribution lines are the medium voltage lines. They run from like 4,000 volts up to 26,000 volts. Above that, we have our higher voltage transmission, have about 800 miles of transmission. Vast majority of that is overhead. The cost premium for overhead underground on transmission is much, much higher. It goes up with the voltage. Below our distribution level, you go into the homes and businesses at 480 volts and below, and of course, all of that is insulated in a conduit. So we're really talking about that middle voltage level, 4 kV. Most of our 4 kV is overhead. Virtually all of our, we have some 13 kV, which is all underground, and then about 50-50 on the 26 kV. 6,500 miles in total of distribution circuits, and about half of it, a little over half of that, is currently underground. We've seen stories like this over the years. It wasn't long after I came to work at JEA, and Hurricane Andrew came ashore in South Florida in '92, and that was a significant eye-opening event. We've had a number of storms since then, many significant. This is a shot actually of Sandy from last fall's damage up in the Northeast. And there's always some heightened interest in the subject of underground distribution. While this may appear a good idea from the perspective of protecting against storm, and it is, by and large, there's a lot of other factors that really need to be evaluated from a total business perspective. A little bit of history. Other than the core downtown of Jacksonville, which includes South Bank, which are underground and have been underground for many, many years, outside of the core, we used to have overhead power lines for the most part. In the 70s, there was a city ordinance passed that mandated that all new developments, residential, commercial developments, go underground. JEA and basically all the other utilities in the industry said, okay, but the developer needs to pay the cost differential, that upfront cost differential between the more expensive underground lines and the base overhead. In other words, we don't absorb that premium into the rate base. So that's been basically the plan in Duval County and throughout the industry since the 70s, when the strong push for underground distribution started. In the early days, JEA went in and would bury the lines and come up with a total price for the project. We'd calculate what it would have been if it had been overhead fed, and we would bill the developer the differential. After a few years, we began putting the wire in conduit. Works much better from a reliability perspective, lasts longer, And what has evolved is the developer installed conduit system standard. Basically, the developer puts the conduit in while they're out there doing all of their other civil infrastructure, the water, the sewer, the reclaim, the drainage. They put our pipe in and they dedicate that over to us along with easements. That is considered essentially equivalent to their contribution to the underground differential. So what this means is the folks that ultimately buy those homes have paid a bit of a premium to have the underground system installed, and the alternative is for us to absorb it or through some other funding mechanism and applying pressure to base rates. So that's a little bit of the history. In 2004, 2005, state of Florida was hit by 10 named storms, including a number that hit Jacksonville. Wasn't the first time in the history of the Public Service Commission, but there was a study performed. Utilities got together and looked at it and basically validated that it remains very expensive for utilities to pursue underground conversion projects. It's not really cost effective in terms of adequate payback over the life of the system. From a major storm hurricane perspective, the general prevailing wisdom is you're better off hardening your overhead system versus a mass conversion to underground. JEA has heeded that advice and has invested about $20 million over the last 6 years on a variety of hardening systems, including a number of items that are summarized below. We've invested more than normal for the last 5 or 6 years. We think that we got on top of it pretty well. We think that will drop down moving forward to something in the 10 to 15 million range. This is a nice comparison of the major utilities in Florida. The 4 IOUs on the left and then 4 municipals on the right. This is sorted by lowest to highest, left to right, the bottom row, percent underground. So you can see that Gulf, who serves the Panhandle, is just below 24% underground. Duke's a little higher. FPL's around 40. TECO, which serves about 2,000 square miles around Tampa, pretty larger than JEA service territory, is 43. But when you get to the city, the core cities and the municipals, we jump up above 50. 53 for JEA, Orlando, Gainesville, and Tallahassee a little higher. A significant driver there is that top row, which is density, customers per square mile. And if you think about it, it's not too surprising, but the higher the density, if you think about the core of downtown Jacksonville, for example, 100% underground, the higher the density, the higher percentage you're going to have. You would have seen more development over the last 30 or 40 years in city areas as opposed to out in the country area. FPL and Duke and Gulf have a lot of miles of overhead line serving a few customers. So those are the numbers on utilities in the state of Florida. Quick summary of the advantages and disadvantages, and just quite simply the kind of the more significant top to bottom. Underground is more reliable in terms of outage frequency due to reduced exposure to weather, animals, and trees. Flip side is, since it's not up in the air where you can see it, it does tend to be harder to troubleshoot and find the problem. The repair can be expensive and often time-consuming. The second bullet on the right is the other significant item. There is a higher capital cost for both the initial installation, significantly higher cost, as well as the ongoing R&R. On the left, second bullet down, we don't have to trim trees, which is a financial benefit and a community benefit. We spend about $4 million a year on vegetation management, but I might point out the bottom bullet on the right under disadvantages. We get about $4 million a year from AT&T and Comcast because they attach to our overhead poles. So that's a $4 million wash by and large if the overhead poles went away. On the left, again, typically more reliability in terms of power quality, preferred.
What would they do, Mike, if the poles go away? I mean, they would have to basically rent conduit or rent your conduit if that were possible, would they?
Yeah, potentially you could convert the overhead rental to an underground rental. By contract, they can actually stay on the pole. We cut it off at a lower height and they just remain. The pole is deeded over them from an ownership perspective. What they've typically done, and we've worked with them well in the past, is they'll go ahead and put their stuff underground as well.
Okay.
At a cost. And
Understand.
there's a conversion program that exists under a City of Jacksonville ordinance that supports underground conversions, and it addresses. Jacksonville is somewhat unique in the state and in the southeast in terms of having a program that does proactively reach out to the communication providers.
Okay. Do we, in the ordinance, when we do road work, do we have any obligation to put conduit in?
No,
No?
it's not part of the ordinance. The ordinance deals with neighborhoods that choose to come together and do targeted underground conversions.
Okay.
There's nothing that requires conduit with road projects, and we certainly can drill into that a little further. Mr. Hightower?
Okay, I should know this, but under the Better Jacksonville plan, help me out here, that as, getting in deep water here, but there was, under the Better Jacksonville plan, the way I understand it, is that once we would start on water and sewer, we would then approach trying to do everything at that time, so that we only had to cut once and then pave once. Was that was the initial? That's what we said in the brochure we were going to do.
That was a philosophy of sorts that we established in the mid-'60s. We did it for a little while.
Now I'm talking about under the Better Jacksonville plan.
Okay.
Under the Jacksonville plan, if I could, the council authorized an easier joint provision.
Right.
With JEA and JTA to coordinate the utilities, which really JEA was doing in any event, but it would free the city public works department out from a number of constraints, and it sets some form agreements where sometimes JEA would get in the lead for a city of Jacksonville project.
And again, that involves working together on road projects instead of us working independently. But there was no explicit direction to put electric conduit in the ground.
That was the
during the
classic
project.
of what we heard when we did the Better Jacksonville plan, was from neighborhoods. They said,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if you're going to put in water or put in sewer or something, why don't you do it all at one time? Because every time we turn around, you're coming in and
Yep.
repaving. And people
Absolutely.
just said, you know, that's my tax dollars. And I think we really tried the collaboration. It's not always been as timely as you want, but we've tried to do the collaboration, save a little bit of money.
Definitely the way to go. So that's the high-level advantages, disadvantages. Looking at the cost a little bit, the top table compares cost of material. Simple 50 kVA transformer, about a 2 times multiplier on the cost ratio. Conductor, to build a mile of 3-phase 100 amp line is a cost differential at about 9 times, 6 times for the feeder wire. Going from some of the material components, and of course there's many more components that go into the system, and you basically add the material as well as the labor and equipment, you end up with the rough cost estimates below for a single phase 100 amp lateral, 3-phase 100 amp lateral, and the 3-phase 600 amp larger feeder. So 2 to 4.5 times multiplier for new construction. When you move to a conversion, if you've got an established neighborhood, it's always difficult and challenging because of the streets and the sidewalks and the driveways and sprinkler systems to get in. And you've got to start by removing the existing overhead system, and there is typically some undepreciated value on the books for what you're taking out. So all things equal, the previous slide had basic new construction, clean earth type of deal. This would be a neighborhood conversion project. Under the ordinance, we have a little bit of experience with doing neighborhoods, and it runs at about $7,000 per unit. That does not include the cost for the communication companies, nor undergrounding the wire from the road to the weatherhead at the residence. Those would be extra. So about $7,000, maybe $10,000 per household when you add in all the others. Many homes already have converted their service underground, so it would vary a bit on a home-by-home basis. If you take the ballpark categories in the table upper right and those mileages that constitute our 3,000 miles of overhead line and multiply it out, cost per mile, you end up with something on the order of $2 billion if you were to do a full conversion. And obviously that would take a couple of decades to work through. At the end of the day, the estimated rate impact is in the lower right-hand corner. Typical residential customer, 15 to 20, about 30% of the total bill, 30% of the base only. That's generally what $2 billion rolled into the rate base would look like. This is a slide on the
That's over a 30-year period.
Right. 20 years, yeah, depending on how long you do it.
Whatever we
Yep.
chose.
Yes, that would not take effect immediately. This is the ordinance we referred to earlier. JEA, City of Jacksonville, are, I think, unique in the nation in having this sort of ordinance. JEA puts money aside each year. communities come together, a street or a set of streets, they map out their geographical footprint, they get a 75% approval rate. We go do a study and cost it out, come back to the community and tell them what it will cost, and if we move forward, we move forward. JEA will work with AT&T and Comcast to handle the undergrounding of their facilities, and then we roll that into the total project cost. The customer has the option of keeping the overhead service or converting to underground at with his contractor, or we can bundle it into our project. At the end of the day, you get $1 per service per meter per household, which is either paid up front or they can pay it over 20 years at a low interest rate through a connection to the tax bill. So that is the program that's in place today for the city neighborhoods to pursue.
How do you determine what a neighborhood is in order to get to your 75% homeowner agreement?
It's basically a contiguous set of homes and services. If you can't do a house here and a house there, it needs to be something you can draw a circle around and say, okay, all the power lines in this area, you can go into a GIS system or some city maps and map it out. There's no limits to how big or small it can be.
But it doesn't have to be a defined homeowners association.
No, it does not have to be defined. It can be a street. Mr. Hightower?
Having just done that, I will tell you, I get where Peter is going. We did it on our street. As I've shared with the board, I try to listen to my wife, but she says I don't. The one thing that I did listen was that I was not to get involved when our street tried to do that. It had to be somebody else. It is probably the best advice, one of the best advice I've got, 46 years of marriage. I will tell you, I would have needed a trial attorney. I would have killed my neighbors to try to maneuver that. The disadvantages of people want it, they like the idea until you put the pen to the paper and you tell them what you're going to do on that street. We had one gentleman who dogged it for a year and a half, and we had Nancy Kilgo to do that. She gets a gold star. There's a special place in heaven. You find out things about your neighbors that you didn't want to know because they all want the outcome, but you have to you coach them along the whole time. And then the other part was they all wanted it, but they didn't want the utility box in their yard.
Right.
They wanted to have it I mean, it is a unique, everybody's piece of property becomes very sacred to them,
Right.
even though they all want it under, and they all want to pay a different price because they've lived there longer or they're going to move or something like that. It is a unique experiment in human behavior, even on the street, when you try to do it. So anybody who wants to do it, you need to think long and hard. And one of the things that JEA did was they came out and had a couple on our street, 2 or 3 neighborhood meetings. It's the only way that you can jumpstart it. Without it, it would have been chaos. I mean, it comes to the customer part. I will tell you that JEA did an extraordinary job. The patience, the flexibility where they could, but you have to wait because you got to get the whole neighborhood to move along,
Right.
and it's like watching fudge rise. It's not fast. So,
Well, I think this
It's
is something
tough.
we're gonna have to discuss over a period of time. Obviously, the overall costs look like a big number, but actually it's about half of what I thought it would be, which is interesting. And that we have a lot of new neighborhoods that have it. I don't think the process that you went under is gonna get the city anywhere. It obviously hasn't already. I mean, it's so minimal as to how much is being underground through that process. It's a fraction of 1%. So that's not gonna get us there. So, I think over time we need to discuss it, but I think there's probably gonna have to have a different approach if we decide to do some of this.
Right.
And that's just something up for us to discuss and decide what we want to do for the community. And it isn't all just efficiency. There are other intangibles that are worth considering. and we'll see what we come up with.
On that point, the outcome, we have one of the prettiest streets. I mean, it makes a huge
Good outcome.
difference. Everybody is now thrilled. They've just been selective memory about what we went through to get there. But it's beautiful.
But a tough and challenging process, and your case, we had 100% people signing on for it. It was just kind of working through all the details, and it's
We
tough
didn't
and
have
it's slow.
100%.
But I agree with Mr. Bauer. We need to move it forward, and we got to figure out some different ways to
Because if you
approach
try
make
it
easy.
this way, but it'll take forever.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
it does make a
It-
huge
it has.
difference, I will tell you.
This ordinance went in place in 2007, and we haven't had much activity. And you see similar stories throughout the state, and other utilities are generally willing to come in and do it. It becomes a fun, the details of the design aside, it becomes a fairly expensive proposition, and you're dealing with people's property and established neighborhoods. So it's a tough challenge. I've got 2 more slides and finish this up real quick. We did a benchmarking study. Most of the other utilities have programs similar to what we have in Jacksonville. As to a member, the standard is to conduct 100% of the differential or the cost to basically make the base rates whole from a base rate perspective for the higher capital cost. And beyond that, I'll just say that to the extent it's not working well for us, JEA and the city of Jacksonville are unique in that we do have an ordinance that really attempts to promote it. It's much more than what you have in most of the communities around Florida. In summary, then, studies have shown that the conversion simply to protect against storms is not cost-effective. Storm hardening is generally preferred. We've talked about $2 billion and a couple of decades to get it done. Significant upward pressure on rates unless we figure out how to fund it. We have the program in place. Very open to and interested in doing projects under the program, but it's not an easy program to work within. And meanwhile, we continue to make investments in storm hardening the system to improve the reliability. Questions?
To Peter's question, though, we're talking estimated cost of $2 billion over 30 years. What kind of what would that be? I mean, if we were gonna try that, what would be the cost per year?
$2
What do you-
billion
how
divided
you
by
would-
30 is 150. Over 100. If you did that for 20 years, it's 100 million a year. A little lower would be a little lower. A little longer would be longer. $2 billion over 20 years is 100
Well,
million.
to Peter's point,
Mhm.
challenge the community. Be bold or be quiet. Maybe that's what we need to do and see what the reaction would be.
Mhm.
Spend $50 million a year, it's doable within our budget. Maybe you collect some of it in a few increased costs at the base rate,
Yep.
and you start.
Yep.
And the $2 billion, that doesn't include the connection for the homeowners. Is that-
Nor doesn't really cover the AT&T and Comcast connections either, which, to Mr. Bauer's point, he thought the two might be a little larger. So if you add those in, it's
It is, so
a
that.
little higher.
So this is only the JEA cost that
Right.
isn't actually the individual
This is
homeowners.
our cost out of the right of way.
Right.
Exactly.
So it's actually, overall
Total.
would be a greater quantum of
Yes.
cost. Yeah.
$2013?
I'm sorry?
$2013? or-
Yeah, all to current day dollars. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you for the information, that's very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Other new business for the group, Mr. CEO? New business, as opposed to your report?
No new business.
Okay, old business. Any old business? Managing Director, CEO's report.
Just for the board, I want to thank Board Member Wimbush and for his attendance this past week. We had a busy week. We talked earlier about the consolidation task force, but we also kicked off our United Way campaign and our leadership meeting and luncheon this week, which was well attended. And of course, we We're going to strive to keep up with our 300,000 plus in giving. The goal this year is about 368,000, I believe, just from JEA employees. Later in the week, we did meet with the ABE group, the American Association of Blacks in Energy. We've got a very active chapter here in JEA, the leading chapter in the state of Florida. And in fact, one of our employees, Dell Knowles, started the entire state chapter of American Blacks in Energy. They facilitated a meeting with myself and 10 of the pastors from the African American community and churches, and I think it went well. We had some good dialogue. We shared some information. We'll continue to reach out to those individuals and churches and communities in terms of conservation, training, and development, and I think it went well. And I thank Pastor Winbush for joining us during that time. And I just, again, make note that J.D. Power customer satisfaction was a heck of a step up in terms of our commercial customers now, going basically first quartile and outranking our peers in the state of Florida. So that we have our final strategic plan workshop. This will be the summation of the work that we've done as a group over the last several seasons here, the spring and summer. And I think we've got a great story to share with you after this meeting.
Thank you, Paul. As far as from that, again, I want to thank the board for the retreat. I think it was very helpful as we moved strategically. To all the presentations, thank you. It was we're doing great. The customer satisfaction. Just really appreciate the feedback. That's what it's all about, and you all are doing. Bruce, again, Bruce has already left. Hopefully he's not already left the building, but I want to thank him one more for 38 years of extraordinary service, and just another fine example of what everybody is doing. So any other business come before the board? If not, we will adjourn to the 19th floor for the conclusion of our meeting. Thank you all for coming. We're adjourned.